Good afternoon. First question, who's in charge of the weather?
All right.
I mean, it's summer, right? Yeah. I was told by someone just before I left San Diego that I told a leader that I was doing this, and the first thing he said was, no spoilers. Which made me wonder how you talk about a book, you know, as the culmination and final finality of the project, blah, 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 this and that, without talking about it. So we're going to have an adventure today, you and I. First question, who hasn't read Magician's End yet? Okay, when I put the stand up like this, you put your fingers in your ears and go, I'm not listening to Ray, I'm not listening to Ray. Okay. You got a wicked echo with this thing. It's like being in a stadium. Okay, the way this works is I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to do some Q&A, and hopefully we'll cover the salient questions you have. I'm not going to talk about Magician's End in great detail because of the spoilers, but I'll tell you a little bit behind the evolution of the projects and how I arrived at that. Sorry, what? I thought somebody said something. Anyway, when I was at university, we played a role-playing game in a universe called the Nikinian Universe. And it was just a bunch of goofy stuff. We threw together maps and charts and gaming stuff. And for those of you who are under the age of 40, we used to just use dice and papers and pencils and half cases of really cheap beer. Before computers. This was before the trash 80s and the Commodore PETs and the Amigas and the Apple IIs. This was actually, use your imagination. When I started writing, it occurred to me that world building was pretty tough and arduous, so I asked my friends, oh, can I use the game universe? And they said, sure, why not? You know, it might be good advertising if we ever published the game. Shows you what we do. So here I am 30 years later, 30 novels in the series, and a whole lot of bloodshed, crazy stuff, love and romance, triumph, tragedy, and I've had a lot of fun. I hope you have too. But about the time I got through the Serpent War, it became apparent that I might end up doing all 5 Riftwars. It occurred to me that with some of the stuff I did in the Riftwar Saga, that it wasn't going to end well. Especially for a number of beloved characters. And having images in my mind of you all storming my house with pitchforks and torches, I decided that I need to come up with a balanced ending that would give you also a sense of triumph along with the sense of loss. And I wanted it all to dovetail into a kind of a whole, maybe I'm not happy with it, but I understand it and okay, so that's the underlying motivation for why Magician's End got written the way it did. When I wrote Magician, I pretty much had no clue what I was doing. You know, I was just throwing stuff up against the wall and saw what stuck, moved things around. Chapter 1 became chapter 5, and then it got cut out of the book altogether, and half of it went back, and the other half went into King's Buccaneer. And by the time it all got done, I had earned while you learn process of how to become a novelist with Magician. I look back on it now, and I realize that there's a famous story in the U.S. about a baseball player that is absolutely God's truth. A long time ago, there was a pitcher for the Chicago Cubs named Lefty Gomez, and he threw a no-hitter. But it was one of those no-hitters where in the 3rd inning, some guy was sliding face first across the outfield to hit the ball in the tip of his glove, and in another inning, somebody was climbing the wall and pulling down a home run and robbing the guy. And another one, there was a pop fly, the catcher hurled himself into the stands and caught the ball for the final out, that kind of thing. And Lefty's coming into the interviews in the post-game in the locker room, and one of the writers in Chicago said, "Wow, lucky, lucky, lucky." And Lefty looked at him and said, "You know, I'd rather be lucky than good." Well, I got very lucky with Magician, and the best part about it was I had people who allowed me to learn. Now, kind of a short window here, so I want to touch on a couple of things. We're going to do a little parenthetical moment here. How many of you want to be writers? Oh, please don't. I had the privilege of having dinner with Ted Sturgeon in about 1976 or 77. And I told him I was thinking of writing, and he said to me, "Oh, don't. It's just a terrible life. It's heartbreak, it's rejection, a sense of failure. It's just something that you'll be much happier if you find a different calling, young man." So 5 years later, I'm at a convention in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I hand Ted a copy of Magician. And I said, "Ted, if you remember that night in Torrey Pines when you told me not to be a writer, here's my book." And Ted looked at me and said, "You know, I tell that to everybody, and the writers never listen." If you want to be a writer, your number one quality that you must aspire to is endurance. You must put yourself in the chair every day and write. You must be prepared for rejection. You must be prepared for frustration. You must be prepared for every disappointment you can imagine, and a few you haven't thought of. And still keep going. And if you make it, the payoffs are gold. This is the hardest job I've ever had, and it is the best job I've ever had. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I still find myself alone in my house, jumping up from the computer going, "Damn, I'm good." And that's until my editor reads it and says, "No, you're not. Do that again." But the point is, I get to play Let's Pretend for money. I'm a professional liar. I just make stuff up. And I live in a very nice house in San Diego, and I'm putting my kids through college. It doesn't get any better than that. So when I discovered you lot in 1987, I learned for the first time, and it's been borne out on every visit, that I have the most avid, enthusiastic, and appreciative fans in the world here in Australia. Give yourself a hand. And if it wasn't for the fact that every time I turn the TV I see a sports event, I'd tell you to get out more often, but apparently you do. So all things being equal, I don't have a lot more to add right now about the Riftwar cycle, the individual sagas, or Magician's End. But I will take some questions, and raise your hand, or it gets really quiet in here. You know, it's saying you watch around.
G'day, how you doing? First thing, you're fucking awesome. Sorry for swearing. I appreciate the shit out of you, dude. I wish I knew because I would have dressed as Thomas and spent that $300 on the outfit. Yeah, sorry, that's it.
You have a question?
Yeah, are you going to write anything else? Are you going to start?
Oh, hell yes, I'm not dead. I mean, somebody put up on the HarperCollins tweet and website, Facebook, they said, Magician's End comes up next week. Should we start a support group? Not dead. Honest. Just stop writing that series. Now, I've got a series that I'm working on right now called The War of Five Grounds, which as soon as I mention that title, people say, "Oh, is it like Game of Thrones?" Okay. Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones with show tunes. Yeah, no, George and I are old friends, and it's nothing like his stuff. But it's a new series, new universe, new characters. The first book is titled King of Ashes. And if I get the bloody thing finished, about a year from now you'll be reading it.
Thank you very much. Happy to hear that.
My pleasure.
The Empire series that you wrote with Jenny Works, that was a brilliant mirror to the first saga. How did that all come about?
How did the Empire series come about? Well, when I was about halfway through A Darkness of Sethanon, and I had Pug already returned to Kelowon, I was starting to get fan mail, and this is back when it actually arrived in an envelope with a stamp on it, because the internet was still ARPANET, and you had to basically have a university account or work for the Department of Defense of the U.S. to actually use it. And that's when they were sending batch files with little personal messages attached to that. That's how all that stuff started, by the way, if you don't know that. We could go off on a tangent and talk about, you know, NSA snooping through files and stuff. But back in the day, it was computer operators abusing the privilege of transmitting files to their buddies at other universities, and then, end of file, note, hey Joe, did you see the Bears game last night? That's how it all started. People were interested in Kelowon, and I had shown you everything I had. I mean, it was a movie set world. There was nothing behind the facades. I had none of the virtual history and culture and politics that I had with Bohemian. I met Janny Wirtz, and we got chatting about stuff, and she said, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I'd really like to do the other side of the Rift War, and I really want to do a strong female protagonist, but I don't want chicks in chainmail. I don't want a Red Sonja clone or a guy with curves, who acts like a guy with boobs. It's just, you got to be a realistic woman. Never having been a teenage girl myself, I felt a little disadvantaged with this ambition. In 5 minutes, Janny said, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do that, and try that. And I went, okay. So Janny and I were pen-palling for a while, and I was picking her brain, and finally I said, why don't you co-write this with me? And she said, no, I'm busy, I got my own stuff, and it took me a year to talk her into it. It's supposed to be one book. Ideas kept flowing, things kept growing. And finally, we told our publisher, okay, Serve of the Empire is going to be 2 books. And he said, okay, fine. What are you going to call which? He said, well, the second half is going to be Serve of the Empire. Let's call the first half Daughter of the Empire. So we sent in the Daughter manuscript, and Doubleday in the U.S. and HarperCollins, which back then was actually Grafton, were very happy with it. And halfway through Servant, I was talking to Janny. We were at her place in western Pennsylvania. I was actually southeastern Pennsylvania, west of Philly. And I said, oh, I know what the 3rd book is about. And suddenly this pencil came sailing in my nose, and she said, what 3rd book? And I said, Mara versus the Magicians. And she went, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Damn. The Genius of Mara. And I give Janny very high marks for this, is she's never personally ambitious. Every move she makes is to protect the people she loves. And that's why she works. Because if she was just another ambitious Serrani, you'd kind of go, okay, we got bad guys and worse guys in this book, so. She's somebody you can identify with, she's somebody you can root for, she's somebody you can care about. And I give huge credit to Janny for that. Other question?
Why Pug? I mean, that's kind of a bit of a weird name. You know, the great magician Pug?
Yeah, really? He could have been Herb. Melvin, you know, Murgatroyd, Herkimer. He was going to be Pip, because I love Dickens' Great Expectations. And about the time I was halfway through the first draft of the first half of the book, I picked up an Alan Dean Foster novel called The Taran Crane, where he introduces his characters of Flinks and Pip the Fire Dragon. And oh hell, somebody's already got a Pip. Pug was a placeholder. I'll call him Pug until I come up with something that, well, here we are 30 years later and I still haven't come up with anything better than Pug. But the odd thing is it works. It's just this name, and it's almost antithetical to who the character is in real life. You know? And think about it. The action hero, Melvin Gibson. Hello? I mean, sometimes, you know, it just works. Okay, so you call him Mel, but his name is Melvin, you know. I think that sometimes really happy accidents occur. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, you know, this is blinding me.
I know, I've seen at least 2 video games in the kind of series. Have you been approached about any others? Or do you plan on approaching anyone about any video games?
Well, I don't approach anybody, they approach me. Ah, thank you. The way it works is, and I don't want to turn this into a clinic in optioning film rights on literary projects, but basically, somebody calls you and says, hey, we love your book, we think Feist is a genius, we want to go out and make billions of dollars on the franchise, so can we have the right to represent the book in negotiation with various funding people and studios, and oh, by the way, we don't want to pay you any money. And we go, no. And sometimes they say, well, we'll give you $1. And sometimes you actually get a contract. I've optioned stuff, okay? I've had stuff, you know, where people have sent me checks for fairly substantial amounts of money. But Hollywood is kind of this Byzantine culture where there are 40 people that have to say yes, none of whom ever got fired for saying no. So the fact that anything ever gets made, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but if you know the business, you know how absolutely astonishing the risk-taking that put Game of Thrones together was. Because they didn't go like Starz did with Spartacus, where it was, you know, limited, small sets that were cleverly used in disguise and a lot of CGI. They're up in Northern Ireland on location with 500, 1,000 extras. That's not cheap. So it was a huge risk. So sometimes, you know, we're always talking to people. I mean, I got a phone call this morning, my agent did, and I got an email from him. And you know, we got a new negotiation on, and I'll be flying back on July 2nd. And I expect that there's a 50-50 chance I'm going to be in LA after the 4th of July holiday, talking to some guy about, okay, we really think you're a genius, and we really want to work this out, we don't want to give you any money. Okay, I don't know. Another question.
Just wondering, in terms of writing a novel when Magician came out, elves and dwarves have been done by Tolkien, been done by a few others. What would you recommend in terms of using other magical races in novels?
Well, you know, there's a lot of discussion about that, and it's been going on quite a long time. I mean, you know, it's like somebody was being a little unkind to Steve Donaldson about the Ill Earth Wars and saying, well, the cave people are as dwarves, they just don't look like dwarves, and the tree people are as elves, they just don't look like elves. And the validity of that observation is that, like any genre, every fantasy has to have certain fantasy tropes. There has to be at least one supernatural or fantastical thing, otherwise it's a romance or a murder mystery or a Western. It's like you don't have murder mysteries without dead people. You don't have Westerns without horses and guns. You don't have romances without like some kissing somewhere. It's simply things that are expected. The trick is to find an original take, even if it's a slight one. My elves are nowhere near as majestic as Tolkien's, for instance. You know, my elves actually work for a living. They don't hunt stuff. You know, it's really hard not to do a dwarf who doesn't have a Scottish accent. I don't know what that's all about. You know. They all kind of sound like that, don't they? Yeah. I was over at Weta the day before yesterday, you know, and looking at all the junk and talking to the guys. That's got to be a fun place to work. Yeah. There you are.
Hi.
Hi.
I first read Magician when I was a kid, and I think the Harry Potter series was just at a certain point, and I finished it up to that point. My mum hands me a book, Magician. I didn't even read the back of the book. I just started reading it, not expecting anything, and not knowing that it was going to go to 7 movies like that.
By the way, when I wrote it, I didn't know it was going to go 30 books a year.
And that's the sort of like enlightenment that occurred to me, and I was wondering, was it the same sort of story for you? I read the book and had no idea that there was something after it.
Okay, I thought maybe if I got lucky, I might end up with a trilogy. So I buried some little bits of business in Magician that were just a little foreshadowing. But I didn't want to make the reader all crazy like if I never had another book come out. You left the guy in the closet. What happened to him? That kind of stuff. So I got through the Riftwar, and then I got through the other side of the Riftwar. And my editor said, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you want me to do next?" He said, "Well, another Bohemian book." And the reason for that is the Chaos Wars, the original Riftwar, was starting to really take off. And there's something that I don't understand, that a lot of people are resistant to collaborations. You know, they say, well, I don't want to read something he wrote with somebody else. And that's just a fact of publishing. It has nothing to do with my desires to tell a story. It has to do with marketing saying, no, we don't want you working with anybody else for a while. Which is why I had the big jump between the Empire stuff and the, Frondor Legacy stuff. Finally, it was basically, okay, that's great, what's next? What's the next story? Well, then the kids go down the road, they buy some ice cream, and the giant steals the chariot, and fine. Then what happens after that? And that's how it happened. It just became this, okay, and then I realized at the end of Serpent War, I'm doing all 5 wars. I'm doing all 5 Rift Wars. And as I said earlier, that's when I started thinking, how am I going to end this all? There we go, here.
Has the kind of fans you have changed over the years?
I'm sorry, there's some echo going on. Did you say that again?
Has the kind of fans you have changed over the years?
No. I get asked a couple of times a month or two, well, do you listen to your fans? And I say, do I listen to the guy who says, I thought Magician was the best thing you've ever written and you got straight into the dunny since then? Or the guy who says, I just read your next book and it's the best thing you ever wrote. Who am I listening to? I don't listen to anybody, I listen to myself. Writers write for themselves. Unless you're working in a situation where you're doing a licensed project, like a Star Trek novel or something like that, or you have external clamps put on you, you are attempting to amuse yourself in the perhaps unfounded hope that other people are going to like it too. And if you do it right, you make a living. I need the mic
We all
up.
love the Magician series.
Say again, start over.
Okay. We all love the Magician series. We've been writing it for a very long time. It must have been a really hard decision for you to sort of say that's the end of it, I'm finishing it up.
No, it's not.
No?
No.
Okay.
It's a story.
I'm just wondering,
No, I mean, I got lots of stories.
is it really the end of it?
I got lots of stories. I mean, I have fun. I love the universe. I'm pretty proud of the entire sweep of the narrative. I think, you know, there's a lot of grins and giggles and a couple of tears and some how dare he do that's in there. But I got stuff. I got more characters. I got a couple of guys you're going to fall in love with in King of Ashes. Trust me, you're going to like them a lot.
You've made mention about your new book series. What's it like to write not in leukemia for a change? Or
well, I did it once before with Fairy Tale. And that was a critical move in my development as a brand, actually, to show the publishing world that I could write something that wasn't leukemia. And people in the publishing industry will get this, and most of you probably won't. The reason I can go do the other stuff I want to do now is because Fairy Tale came out in 1989 and it's still in print. That's huge. Means if I can get my publisher drunk so she doesn't know what she's agreeing to, then I can write whatever I want. You know, actually, she's very supportive of my choices. I think it's going to be good. And never say never. There's no rule that says if sometime in the future I get a wild hair, I can go back to leukemia when I want. So anything's possible.
Hi, who was your favorite character to write?
None of them. Some are more fun than others. But the thing about characters is that, you know, you're looking at the big green head with the smoke and flames, and I'm the guy behind the curtain. I'm looking for a specific reaction to a character whose only role is to fill space in the ecology of the narrative and propel the story. If I really do it well, you like the guy, or you hate the guy, or you think she's swell, or you think she's a bitch, or whatever, but it's about propelling the narrative. Sometimes you really get lucky. I got a nasty note from a guy after Rage of the Demon King when I killed off Admiral Vicor, because he was like there for what, 6 pages? And somebody said, "He was great! Why did you do that? I want to see him in some more stuff." And I'm sitting there thinking, dude, that's everything I got. You know, I mean, I got nothing more for you with that guy. Which tells me I did it right because the reader wanted more. Always leave them wanting more. Yeah.
Game of Thrones is known for taking out major characters without warning, so on and so forth. Was there an actual character that you actually had feeling in the sense of, I really don't want to kill him off, but I'm going to miss him anyway?
No, like I said before, I don't miss them. There are times for them to get off stage. Sometimes in a great heroic deathbed scene like Lord Boric. Sometimes in a closet where nobody finds them for a day like Locklear. Falling off a horse, breaking a hip at the age of 80 like Arutha. It's life, you know. We don't all get a heroic goodbye scene. I mean, some of us slip on a bar of soap. You know, it's just life. And George kind of really has taken it to a new level. It's like the thing about Red Wedding, if you know the books, is you got, oh damn, now who do I root for? Well, the Targaryen chick is kind of hot. Maybe I'll root for her. You know, so I mean, that's George just messing with you because he can. He's really good. I mean, I've been a fan of George's since I read Armageddon Rag back in about '86. You know, and I just love his stuff. He's just clever. See, you can be good without being clever. And you can be clever without being good. But when you're good and clever, it's fun because you never know what's coming next.
Did you ever get any inspiration from any fiction you actually read growing up?
Yeah, every damn book that was worth reading since I was reading Winnie the Pooh. You know, if you're a writer at heart, even if you don't know you're a writer, you're a sponge. You just drink stuff up. You go, wow, that worked. Even though you don't know you're thinking, wow, that worked. You go watch a horrible old 1950s sword and sandal dubbed Italian gladiator movie, and you go, damn, that was almost right. What they should have done was this. You look at how good stories are constructed. You look at how stories fall apart. But it's not a cognitive, I'm paying attention, it just happens naturally. And when you sit down and start writing your first narrative, most of you who want to be writers, the first thing you'll get is like, oh no, this isn't the perfect first paragraph. Yeah, you're right. And it never will be, so just write the bloody damn thing. Writing is rewriting, you know, and your first drafts are going to suck. Unless you're a lot better writer than most people I've met. But you hang in there and you perfect your craft. So, who do you read? Well, I read Shakespeare. I love it. I mean, the guy knew a thing or two, which is why 400 years later we're still paying good money to go see his plays, because they're great plays. You don't have to read everything he wrote, but read some of it. I recommend Hamlet. I think it's just genius. The structure, the narrative, the characters. Is Hamlet crazy or isn't he? And just pretending he's crazy. At the end of the play, you tell me, I've seen that thing produced 5 times, I've read it a dozen, I still don't know. You can leave the reader with unanswered questions as long as they're really good unanswered questions. Read the Russians, you know, a couple of them anyway. Read Jane Austen, because she's got some real decent chops. You know, read Hemingway. Not a lot, but read his short fiction. Short fiction is great. Read Fitzgerald's short fiction. They're better short story writers than they are novelists. Read Twain. You know, read Dickens. I mean, keep in mind, Dickens was a guy who was being serialized in the Strand newspaper. His paycheck depended on people wanting to know what comes next. Just read. But don't, by the way, at university, do not study literature. Read literature. Don't study it. Because all lit classes will do is teach you how to deconstruct other people's fiction. Study history, study psychology, study sociology, study cultural anthropology, study politics, political science. You want to see, you know, death matches, tune in and watch Parliament. It's better than UFC cage matches.
There's a particular twist with the demon character, Child, through the last trilogy. I wonder if there's any inspiration you can reflect on without too many spoilers.
No, actually, Child and Belag were... There are times when my subconscious is so much smarter than I am. I just go with stuff to see what happens, and that was an example of that. I had information I needed to give the reader in Magician's Inn about the cosmology. The fact that the demons were the shock troops for the Dread had already been revealed. But I kind of wanted the reader to know 2 things. One, how the demons felt about that, and also the demons' point of view on all the cosmological stuff I showed at the end of Magician's Inn. So I had these 2 characters, and I was watching their evolution, and originally they were just going to be Child and Belag. You know, sort of force of nature, angry, primal demon, and this studious, scholarly, not so scary demon. And suddenly along the way, they started behaving in a way where these guys are acting awfully familiar. I mean, there's something about them. And the scene in which we do the reveal and the personalities emerge, I didn't know that was going to happen until I wrote it. Sometimes you get out of your own way and just let stuff happen. Are we done?
We are done. We've actually run out of time.
Thank you.
We'll be running.
We'll be here all week. Please tip your waitress.
Please put